if you want to find out how to get to do what some people have done that you want to do, go talk to them, talk to people in the career field. I found out that all the astronauts except one, the original 7, were engineers, and all of them were pilots. So I said, that's what I want to do. As it turns out, I like flying. And so we went from there. I got a degree in engineering, and I really wanted to do aerospace because it had the word air in it, and it was about flying. And someone sat me down and said, listen, you really want to be a mechanical engineer because that's a subset of aeronautical and aerospace. I don't know if I bought into it, but I must have, because I went ahead and did it. So I got my engineering degree from Tufts University in mechanical and was commissioned in Air Force ROTC. I graduated in 1985. So, and off I went. I couldn't quite get a pilot's license or my pilot slot in the Air Force. At that time, they wanted pilots to have perfect vision. And my vision was probably like 2040, 2050. And so luckily I had an engineering degree. And the funny thing is that my first job was as an electrical engineer with a mechanical engineering degree, but we'll go into that later.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I wanted to interrupt you for a second and ask you, so you're going to Tufts University and you're studying mechanical engineering, but you have a passion for flying. So how did you balance that? How did you handle that?
So, what was interesting is I was the kind of kid that had more energy than common sense. And I started a flying club at Tufts University. So I just wanted to fly.
You didn't have your private pilot's license yet, but you started a flying club.
Well, I started it after I got my private pilot's license.
Okay.
I got my private pilot's license at age 19 or 20, I think. And so I was in college, so I started a flying club. And that at least kept me going as far as, just interested in aviation. And then I had professors who were nice enough to tailor the fluid dynamics classes to airfoils and wings. And so that was close enough to flying for me. So I was happy.
Yeah. So you started, what inspired you to say, you know what, I'm going to start a flying club, while I'm finishing up school?
You know what? It was simply the fact that I was sitting there dealing with engines and all kinds of mechanical engineering stuff. I needed something about airplanes. Being an Air Force ROTC wasn't quite enough for me at the time. They had a simulator that I could fly in, which was really kind of cool. I just needed something that I did that I could relate to with flying. And so it was just something I had to do. So I was able to meet other people, other kids, college students who had the same aspirations that I did. We went out to the airport. We just had a great time.
Yeah, and so with the flying club and Air Force ROTC, in terms of talking to today's generation of future flyers and even current flyers that may be still in college and working on a degree towards their aviation career, the ROTC program, do you think that's a good way to go?
It certainly is. Back when I went to school, it was very expensive, and I was able to get a full scholarship for college. Now I think, and I can't remember, but they do it in tiers. So depending on which tier you qualify for, you can get a significant amount towards your college education. And so for me, it was an avenue to fulfill a dream. And oh, by the way, I got to take a little stress off my mom by getting college paid for, except for room and board. I had to pay about $2,000 a semester to eat and sleep.
So how did you overcome everything, overcome the obstacle once you got in the Air Force and really started to serve?
That's really an amazing question. I knocked on doors. Again, I was one of those people that was full of more energy than common sense. And I just wanted to fly. So I let everyone know I wanted to fly. It was about 3 years into the situation where I kind of became discouraged. I'd gone to the Guard. I had a mentor who, his name is General Russell Davis. I knew his brother, his brother told him about me. He saw, the things I'd done, and he and I just kind of became friends. He was a great mentor. I applied at his unit. Turns out that my eyesight again was a barrier. They couldn't get a waiver for me. And so around about 88, I began to feel like this just wasn't going to happen. So I had at the same time, and this is kind of what goes in with, as you're preparing for your career, do other things, help as many people as you can, and just get involved in the community. As it turned out, my work in the community at that time, San Antonio, Texas, where I was stationed, someone took notice and said, hey, I understand you want to go to pilot training. I said, yes. And he talked to someone and they looked at my records. And long story short, I was given what is called an administrative exception to policy. My eyesight was good enough that once I was a pilot in the Air Force, I could go ahead and keep flying. And so wow. That's called Standard 1A. To get in, they had something called Standard 1. And so one of the same people I had sat on the desk and said, hey, can't you just give a brother a break? He outlined on a piece of paper and said, Derek clearly meets flying class 1A and is therefore qualified for pilot training. And that took an okay from a 4-star general. That was a friend who knew a friend who spoke to the 4-star general who didn't know me, but took a step to trust me because of what his friends had told him. So off I went in 1988 in August, proud and scared. One of my best friends, we'll talk about him later, had just gone to pilot training, I think in '87. His name is Michael Anderson. Some of you may know him. He was astronaut killed on the Space Shuttle Columbia. But he and I were really good friends in San Antonio. And so I had the benefit of having basically gone through pilot training with him. And then when I went through pilot training, I had all that experience behind me.
You knew what to expect.
I did.
Yeah.
And that's, again, mentoring.
Yeah. So coming back to the community factor, you use the term community. So you're saying that when you were trying to get to become a pilot or get into flight training, and you were dealing with all kinds of challenges to overcome that one obstacle, you got involved. In what ways did you get involved? What did you do specifically that kept your name up front, besides knocking on doors and saying, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a pilot?
So, not so much up front, but one of the things I did is I wanted to pledge a fraternity when I was in college, and I was just too academically involved. But I pledged a graduate chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, the greatest fraternity out there. And
that's debatable, but go ahead.
Yeah. But just met everyone in the community through there. I went on marches, Cinco de Mayo. We would clean up parks and work on houses and help them rebuild houses that were broken down.
So you did real community work. You're talking about actually out in the community.
Yeah. And that plus the fact, and by the way, one of the gentlemen who helped me was someone who I met through Kappa Alpha Psi, and also I knew him because he was an Air Force officer, and I became a member of the Tuskegee Airmen organization. You know me, I had to have something about flying.
Yes.
And eventually became president of that chapter in San Antonio. But again, just through that organization and just doing works through that and lifting up the names, I met one of my great mentors. His name is Fred Gregory. He was one of the first, he was the first Black space shuttle commander, one of the first space shuttle pilots. He was in that class and just been a great mentor for me. And it was through all that I got the phone call one day, hey, I heard you want to be a pilot. And I just thought, yeah, okay, this was after I'd kind of given up on the idea that it wasn't going to happen. And within 2 days, I was deemed qualified to compete on a board and got selected, and off I went.
Yeah. What was military flight training like? Was it tough? You said you kind of had a heads up on it because of your friend prior, going through it the year prior. But did you find it easy or hard for you, or was it a natural?
So, so let me tell you, I as you said, I have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering. I have 2 masters. Um, Undergraduate pilot training was the hardest thing I had ever done in my life. Um, and it wasn't because the things they ask you to do is hard or are hard. It's because you are evaluated every single day. And just being looked at and evaluated every single day for me was one of those things that was pretty tough. And they expect you to perform every single day. I mean, you have some down days and they kind of understand your body of work means X. And if you don't do it particularly one day, they'll take a look at you. And you fly sometimes 2 times a day, so you get a chance to clean that up. But it was literally the hardest thing I'd ever done up to that time.
So, that's pretty interesting because I'm just thinking ahead, and I'm thinking about the fact that you really had some challenges. You overcame them. You got into flight training. It was tough, but you powered through that. At what point did you say, "Oh yeah, and by the way, besides flying airplanes, I'm kind of interested in going out into space"?
So, that was since age 6, right? And so I'm that guy that I'm full of more energy than common sense, right? So I was able to kind of just put my head down and say, I was one of those guys, ignorant enough to say, if other people can do it, I can do it. My mom instilled that in me. And I looked at people. I was blessed to have people that just, I crossed their path, they crossed my path. And I was able to see, these guys and gals, they're pretty normal. The difference is effort. You got to put forth the effort. And, so like I say, I enjoyed pilot training. I had a great time. I finished near the top of my class. But getting there, I remember, just to show you how much pressure I was under, I developed TMJ, which means I grinded my teeth at night because I was just under so much stress trying to
Oh
do well in the
wow,
program. And it wasn't anything severe or whatever, but it was the kind of pressure I put on myself.
sure.
Um, I would just say that, you know, uh, people saw that effort, and I would talk to my colleagues. Now it's funny, I talked to my colleagues I went through pilot training years later, and they could never see that. So it was something I just internalized, and just had fun with it. And that day, pinning on those silver wings, that was just like, I'm done.
You've arrived.
I have arrived.
So one of the things you and I were talking about earlier in the pre-show, we were talking about um, mentoring, and more importantly, or along the same lines, we were talking about how everything you're doing towards a goal, somebody is probably watching. So while you may have an overt mentor, somebody that is mentoring you, and they're guiding you along your career, you also have people behind the scenes that you may or may not know
That's
are
right.
also having an impact on your career. And
That's right.
you've experienced that. So can you kind of share with our audience what that means?
So this is something pretty near and dear to me. I've had, throughout my Air Force career, people that were looking out for me, that kind of saw this little kid who was full of more energy than common sense, and needed some guidance, and would kind of help me through, and would watch from a distance, and just provide that little, hey, pick up the phone call. This guy needs a chance, or this is someone you can trust. He'll do a great job. And then there were the direct mentors that told me how to navigate those things. Um, Probably my most stark example was going into NASA. My best friend, Michael Anderson. Uh, Funny, when we first met, we were just flying little piston aircraft. Neither of us told each other we wanted to be an astronaut. Um, we
Hmm.
both knew we wanted to be Air Force pilots. He got in. He had a pilot slot when he was in college and lost it because he stayed an extra 6 months to get a double degree. I couldn't get one because of I didn't have 20/20 vision. So he got in and was out flying. I went to pilot training, and he would check up on me. When I went to NASA, he was, let's see, he got selected in 1997, I believe. And I was at, or 96, and I was at Vance Air Force Base as an instructor in a T-38. He called my room, my flight room, and just said the words, "Deke, I got it." And I screamed like a little child, right? Lost all my cool in front of my students, right?
Right.
And then went back into my office, and he went up on his first flight, I think in 98. So I got a second master's degree in 2000, and then I applied in 2002.
So you were how old when you applied?
I was 40.
Okay.
That's 40. And
did that ring any bells with you, or you say, what am I doing? Or was it just something that you always wanted to do and you were still within the realm of doing it?
I was still within the realm of doing it. And I met people along the way who had told me, because I thought the same thing, like, you must be too old. No, they were accepting guys that were my age and older. So I thought, oh, well, this is great. And it was just a lesson, valuable lesson for me, is you never say no,
right,
unless someone tells you no. And even then, you don't stop. But anyway, I put my package in. It takes about 2 years for this whole process to go through.
Right.
My friend Michael was on the board, even as his mission kept getting slipped, his second mission. And one of the things that was hard for me was that Michael would not score my package, even though he was on the board to score the package. And he said, no, I want the process to be the process, so we're not going to score your package. But I put him as a reference, and he said, if anyone asks me, I'll tell them it's a no-brainer. You should get D. So my package goes through. He dies in January, February of 2003.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was blessed. I was very honored. I did his eulogy at Arlington Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
And I was there at the event with his wife and his children, and it just left a mark with me. And I remember one question. I got interviewed, and they said, do you still want to do this? Just full and open honesty here. I'm a devout believer in Jesus Christ. And I believed that, you could leave this earth at any point in time. And God wasn't finished with me yet. And just like the witnesses in the Bible who were prophesying and testifying of God, no one could kill them until their job was done, and God then allowed them to die. And I just simply said that, my wife has always been behind me. And I don't know whether it was because she found out how much I was worth in insurance money or not, but she always supported me. And I said, I'm just going to do it.
Let's hope there was more to it.
Yeah, well, yeah. She's the best, my best friend.
She is. I've met her a number of times. You have a wonderful wife.
But so you're asking me about these people behind the scenes. So 2003 February, I did that. Didn't really understand that the head of the astronaut office was standing beside me on the podium as I was giving the thing for Michael at
Arlington. Yeah.
At Arlington. And so whatever I said meant something to him, and he probably thought I was able to do a fairly good job. But anyway, later, as my package kept going through the program or through the process, I got a call in July. Hey, Derek, we'd like you to come down here and interview. Right. So now my heart just about jumping out of my chest.
Right.
And doing this thing for the White House and Congress in general, you can't just say, hey, I'm leaving. Although I'm sure they would let you go. Hey, I got a flight. I got an opportunity to go interview at NASA. Can I miss this flight? So I told them, I'm kind of busy. I don't think I can make it in August. And so they scheduled me for mid-November.
Oh, wow.
Now I got to tell you. So I was in the last interview group, or the next to last interview group. I can't remember. When I got there, they looked me straight in the eye and they told me, we have never had anybody tell me we're too busy. So I was just one of these guys that, hey, listen, I was a straight shooter. So
Right.
I go through the process, and there's a lot of people, as you can see, that I didn't know that had input, that knew me, that Michael had talked to, that others had talked to, that I didn't know that my package made it through when it was one of these packages that seemed interesting enough that they selected me to come in and interview.
Almost
So I go
references, almost references that weren't official references that you had listed or anything. These are
absolutely,
just, yeah,
absolutely. And so I get there. The week is probably, and it's literally 7 days, 6 days, a full week. You start on Sunday. They tell you, listen, it's not the safest thing in the world. Something happens every 115 events. Then they showed you how much you get paid, and it ain't much. And they said, so you're not going to get rich. And then they give you a bunch of other things that they tell you, and then they put you in front of a 6-hour, 7-hour battery of tests. 1 hour of it is cognitive, and the rest of it is to see if you're cuckoo or not. 3,000 questions, something like that. And so that Monday you go through, you take all your tests and everything.
Quite a process.
I was poked in places I forgot I had. It was an amazing thing. I thought at least after this physical, I should probably be able to get cheaper insurance because they check you out pretty thoroughly. At the end of the process, and I guess I can say her name. Well, I won't say her name. It was Krista McAuliffe's backup. I remember Chris McAuliffe died in the Challenger. She had an astronaut. She met me at a social we were having, and she basically told me, and I was like, and she just, so at least at that point, yeah, be cool, act like you've been here, At that point, I think she was just telling me that the board liked what happened. So I got home, got to the hotel that night, called my wife. Again, I didn't know this woman from Adam. She was on the board, but she was looking out or interested, or at least saw something in me. So my wife and I, we contacted a realtor and we found a house not too far from my buddy's widow. And so that was November. In January, I got the "we regret to inform you" notification.
Oh, wow.
And it was my eyesight. So the board thought that I was one of the possibles, and the way they do it is the medical, they look at it and then they kind of chip away at what on the board, and that's what's left, that body of people that they say can come in. So once again, it was my eyesight, and basically it was like, it was good for the Air Force, but when you're flying up in space, there's certain things that just can't.
They can't waver on.
Yeah.
So Deke, one of the things that I try to make it a point of with these aspiring young aviation professionals is that we all kind of try to chart our path based on our passion, our desires, our interests, and that type of thing, and what we think we want to do. And my point about that is that your focus had always been to be a pilot. You finally got that opportunity, and you started, you completed flight training and you started flying. But you ended up in a program in the Air Force that few are selected for or are become involved in. And I doubt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you even saw that coming in your early stages of flying, that you would end up in this program that has to do with VIP transport and, for all the way up to the president.
So you're absolutely right. I had pretty much decided to get out of the Air Force at that time. They asked me to move to a place where I would be separated from my family, and I had to make a decision. And the decision was to not go. And so I interviewed at a bunch of places, civilian, and one of the places I interviewed was at the DC Guard unit at Andrews Air Force Base, who did this VIP transport for White House Congress and other dignitaries. And so I interviewed with them probably in October, and I put my paperwork in July. I wanted to give the Air Force 6 months. And so December 31st was coming up right around the corner. And so one of the things that happened was this colonel that I did work for in the Pentagon saw me in the walkway and said, "Hey, Deke, I heard you're getting out. I want you to come work for me." So I worked for him. And so this was the week before Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's. He turned all my paperwork around and I worked for him. While I was working for him, the DC Guard called me up and said, "Hey, if you want to slot with us, you can have it." And it was just a turn of events where people who knew about you, because they want to check you out before they say, "Come into our unit." And people that knew me and spoke up about me and things of that nature said, "Come on in." And it was probably one of the coolest and best flying assignments, a lot of hard work that I had. And if you told me back when I joined the Air Force that this was something I was going to be doing, I just laughed in your face. But again, even as I progressed through that menu, I had a lot of people who were mentoring me. General Hopper, great mentor, would just give me advice. General Lyles, not a non-flyer, but just giving me leadership advice.
So let's give our viewers an idea of what VIP operations are really like in the Air Force, because there is little margin, if any, for error, and it's very demanding because you never know when you're going to be wheels up or when you have to do a special covert type of operation of flying somebody somewhere in total secrecy because of the sensitivity of it, et cetera, and so forth. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so a couple of things they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear "oops." They don't want to hear my bad." So listen, it was a very high degree of precision, but it became a part of your being. So it wasn't something that was just, at least for me, it wasn't like stressful. We had a great bunch of people, a great bunch of maintainers. And the crews that I flew around with, the flight engineers, the guards that we carried when we went to these places, it was just great. What I got to learn, to be honest with you, is every place I went, there wasn't one place I'd ever been on any of these trips. South America, all around the world. We did a couple of around the world trips with congressional delegations. I used to always think these guys are on these trips, and I don't, when I didn't fly it, I would think these are boondoggles. But these trips are very meaningful. And after we flew these people to these locations, the crew, we had sometimes 16-hour days. We'd get off the airplane and I could not wait to get to bed. These folks would tighten up their tie, walk off, and that's when they would start. And so that was pretty revealing to me that our leaders were pretty hard workers.
Sure. And it took and you dealt with this both, I think, and again, I'm trying to remember things that I read about you and that you told me about, but you dealt with this both from the Pentagon and also from the base. But these operations involve a lot of people. And one of the things I want our aspiring young aviation professionals to understand is that there are a lot of different areas that support the main point, which is flying somebody somewhere. And yes, you can aspire to be a pilot and end up being the actual pilot doing that. But most of those flight operations, again, depending on which aircraft, et cetera, but they have the crew, which is the pilot and the engineer and the navigator in many instances, particularly for the president, obviously. But there's also maintenance and technicians, and because these aircraft have to be at the ready 24/7. And as you said, there can't be an oops. And if there is a mechanical, there has to be a backup, because the dignitary and all of the things that are set up in advance for that person, that VIP, to go somewhere, they have to stick to that schedule. And the other thing that I know is a consideration is that these guys usually have schedules that are super tight because they're really busy. So they're doing a succession of things. And if one thing gets thrown off, even by minutes or whatever, then it can throw off the rest of their schedule for the rest of the day or the week, or et cetera. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, I was there for 7 years, and I cannot think of one single time that we ever delayed a flight. I had a buddy of mine when I was at the Air Force, when I was at the Pentagon. I would work the requirements for Air Force One and the rest of the fleet, and the VIP fleet, which meant that when they submitted a budget or they wanted an upgrade to the aircraft, that I was the one that brought that forth and fought for that, and was able to secure that for them, and then they could operate for the year. And we do that year after year. One of the friends I worked with, his name was George Pavelko. He was a navigator on the Air Force One. And he told me that one of the things they prided themselves in was when that clock struck whatever, when they told the president, we're going to be there at 2:15, their wheels would stop at 2:15. That's how accurately they had to plan these flights. They had charts to show their taxi speed and times they were supposed to be at a certain point on the airfield just to get the president. This is after landing, just to get the president to his place on time. And with our dignitaries, we did the same thing. And there were just tons of people. I had to get a security brief on missions, and we had flight attendants who they would cook the meals. They wouldn't go out to a store and get pre-cooked meals. They would actually make these meals, hand make them and have them ready, and then chill them.
And they would be tailored to each VIP.
Before every mission, we'd go to the office. We did a lot of congressional delegations, and they pick out we had a menu for them, and they pick out what they wanted, and then the flight attendants would go shop, and they would make the meals for them. And this saved tons of dollars. I mean, getting prepaid meals is very expensive, and pre-prepared meals.
Sure.
And they make it from hand, from scratch, and they were the best at it. And so there were the flight attendants, there were security guards who, when we stayed with the aircraft, they'd fly with us. We'd go in and sleep in the hotel. Unfortunately, they remained at the aircraft with night vision goggles, and, you know, their guns, just roving around the aircraft, making sure that nothing bad happened to the aircraft before we took off the next day. Like I said, we had people who plan the flights, that when you go over these countries, you need to get what we call diplomatic clearance. And so we had a current operations branch that planned the flights, and with painstaking detail, get all those things set up so that when the flights flew, we had our flight plans, they went off without a hitch. And so there were literally hundreds of people per flight that made that flight happen. And we were just the people that executed it at the end.
So I'm a young person. I just, I'm finishing up college. Maybe I'm in the ROTC program, and I'm going into the service. And counter to what I said earlier, in my case, I kind of know that I would love to be involved in VIP transport for the Air Force one day. What do I need to be doing in the early stages of my career to lay the groundwork for that possibility?
Well, you know, it's kind of like what I said at the beginning, right? First of all, go talk to people who are doing it right now. But really, the things you need to be thinking about is have your bags packed. The road to where you're going to go is sometimes fraught with quick moves. And so what I would say is be ready to go and attack that next challenge. It may not mean a move, but it may mean that in your mindset, you can't be just satisfied with the status quo. The next thing I would say is be an expert where you are, because that job you're going to get, that name you're going to make for yourself, means that people need to know whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to work your fingers to the bone for them and make them look good, make the product shiny. And so I would say, as a pilot, when you come in, become that instructor, become that examiner, take that desk job. because as you progress in leadership, people are going to want to know that you can do some administrative work as well.
I'm sorry, I'm
That
a jet jockey. Take a desk job?
yeah. I got to tell you. So, and you know, what you will find, and particularly in the Air Force, is there's a ton of things. We are the Air Force and we fly, fight, and win. But there's a ton of things, like I said, that go into making that thing happen. And if you don't know what it is these people you are leading are doing, you're not going to be a very effective leader. You're not going to be a very compassionate leader. And if no one's following you, trust me, you're not leading. So,
Well
you know,
said.
doing all those things, I think, is trying to get you to your next position. You shouldn't look at your next position. Everyone always says this, but it's true. Just work like the Dickens where you are. And believe me, people will promote you. I'm the benefactor of that big time. And they'll move you along. And that's just as a pilot, right? If you're going to be the current ops person, right? Take that hard mission to plan. If you're going to be the maintainer, work overtime to get the job done. And when you're finished doing what you're doing, make sure your area is clean. Make sure that plane is spotless. Make sure it looks great, so it looks like no one just fixed the airplane. Just be the expert, and be that hard worker, and you will get your goal. My mom used to tell me. At first, I took it as an insult. She said, "You know, they're not going to let a dummy fly an airplane." And I thought, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Mom, I wanted to lay my head on your shoulder and, you know, feel a tender love, you know. But what she meant is just study
Right.
hard.
I want to move into your civilian life a bit, because I definitely want to cover some of that. But before I do, I just wanted to, and you've been in leadership roles throughout your careers, but still in the Air Force, you've been in leadership role. What are a couple of things real quick that stand out to you that make you say, you know what, I'm watching that one. That person's going somewhere.
So, you know, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. Those things that I just mentioned, those are the things that stick out to me, right? If a person is working so hard, and as a part of a team, you can tell that person that's working really hard to make themselves shine. If you're working so hard as a team, that rang true to me. Be professional, which means being prepared, which means before you speak, study something. The people that had the answer and could present it very well, believe it or not, you know, some people think about and talk about, you know, writing and talk and speaking. I don't need to, you know, well-written positions and papers, those things kind of catch my attention, because I think if this person can take the time to do this, they must be able to do some other things. But really that hard work and teamwork, and really how you mix with other people, those things stick out to me, and you can tell right away that person's going someplace.
How'd you handle disappointment? Because, you know, you're you have a strong sense to you, but you had to be, as an example, when you got the final news about the astronaut program, that had to be very disappointing. How do you overcome that and keep moving forward?
You know, so if you can imagine getting the news that something you thought about since you were 6 years old, literally, and that's your whole life has been based on that. It's not coming to fruition. You know, honestly, I just sat back and I said, dear Lord, you know, there must be something else. And, you know, you have to have people to depend on also while you need to fall back on. And so, you know, first for me was the Lord, but my wife, who I mentioned earlier, is my best friend. And when I found out about it, I didn't say anything to her. Well, she saw a letter that had come through, and I was upstairs, probably crying in my milk in the dark in our bedroom. And she came upstairs and just consoled me and spent time with me. And probably didn't say anything the rest of that night, but just the fact that I knew she was there. And so what I would say is find that someone that you can just spend time with. It doesn't have to be as intimate as, being together all night, and not speaking, but someone that you can go hang out with. Um, my resume is filled with a lot of stuff, but you don't put your failures on your resume. And I got a few of them. And so what I would say is that all through my life, I've had people who were just super positive. And I think that's the key thing. Obviously, I would say, being an ordained minister, that one of the things that I personally have faith and trust in my Savior, Jesus Christ. But having those people around you and having that positive outlook is probably the best thing that's gotten me through any disappointment that I've ever faced.
Sure. From my perspective, you've done a seamless transition from Air Force duty to civilian life, in the sense that when you took the position with General Electric, that flight department, from my observation, coming out to visit you there and getting the tour and seeing how you operated, had a lot of similarities to the VIP airlift stuff that you were doing for the Air Force. So was your transition to civilian life to a job like that fairly seamless, or did it have its, challenges?
So, I think most people think that in the Air Force or the military, when you say, go charge that hill, everyone goes, okay, and they do it. It doesn't quite happen that way all the time. You have to be a leader. There were some challenges, but the one thing that I saw, several things, but it culminates in this one thing. Just like in the military, failure is really not an option. At GE, any corporate business, any job you want to do well, you have to really treat it as failure is not an option. And GE was one of those flight departments. It was one of the first corporate flight departments in America. They had very set policies that were successful, and they would guide you to success. And so one of the things I learned in the Air Force that treated us well in GE was that a process, if you stick with a process and you lay out a process and you follow that process, you will meet with success. And we had various processes that would allow us to meet several objectives, and you met with a lot of success. And so that was a similarity. And so that part was seamless. The people were pretty much the same because they were just as dedicated as any military person I'd ever run up against. I think the trick was getting them to understand that I wasn't, charge that hill because I said so. Listen, if I'm going to listen to you, if I'm going to be faithful, if I'm going to be compassionate, all those things you have to be able to, bring to bear in the military and in the civilian world.
And you were a flying boss too, right? So
I did not. I did some test flights. I fly now, but I wasn't flying then.
You weren't flying then. Okay.
Yeah. And so that was another challenge.
But you could fly to stay current in a particular aircraft and that type of thing.
Not so much, but I could go flying with the crews to, experience what they were going through. And that was one of the challenges, I think, that I mentioned, right? Because they had to know that I was a crew dog just like that.
Okay.
And I had successes there and I had failures there as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't want to let this slip through while we're wrapping up the show in the next 10 minutes, but you're also rotor wing. When did that come into the picture? When did you get your helicopter?
So that was a bucket list item. And I got my helicopter license just prior to 9/11.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, I started it that summer and I finished it that fall. And as you can imagine, people weren't too friendly with helicopters buzzing around low level in the DC area. And so I started it there at an airport just south of Dulles, and I moved up to Maryland. So I would drive up to Maryland an hour and a half to get my helicopter license, and finally finished. But that was a bucket list item, and I got to tell you, I don't have very many helicopter hours, but I got to tell you, man, I really respect a good helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
The precision it takes to do that thing.
Well, we were talking about Marine One earlier.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and the guys that fly and land with pinpoint accuracy on the south lawn of the White House.
With everyone in the world watching them.
With everyone watching, exactly.
You know, you can't mess up with the president on board. No room at all.
Yeah,
No room at all.
yeah. You know, one of the things that I've found since starting this program back in the beginning of July, I've had a lot of aspiring young aviation professionals on the show and that watch the show and that send questions in and things like that. And the biggest challenge for them has been COVID-19. It has been the effect of the pandemic on their career. If you can imagine being a senior in college and you're on track and you're in flight training, and you're getting your different, your commercial and your multi and all those kind of things. And then bam, you get hit with this. And now, the airlines are furloughing people. And so that pilot track you were on has come to a screeching halt. Now, you and I know, and anybody that's been in this industry long enough, we know that, this too shall pass. And before we know it, we'll be talking about, in fact, they're already starting to talk about the shortages that we expect in terms of pilots, mechanics, avionics technicians, et cetera. That won't be far from now when that comes back into play. But if I'm just, finishing up school and trying to move into becoming a professional pilot or something along the lines professionally in aviation, what's your thinking about that? What are your thoughts and recommendations?
So that's a really good question, Vince. I think one of the things that I would stress in this is not look right in front of you, but look long term and understand that these shortages are coming. And if your bags aren't packed, and that means if you aren't prepared to move quickly into these locations where you're going to be needed and to fill in, you won't be ready and you may miss the train. And so I would say if you can't just hold on right now and maintain that currency, do those things that are going to help people. Because one thing I found, once you start helping people immediately want to start helping you. Now I say immediately, but I mean when they get the opportunity.
Sure.
And so I would say, don't look near term, start looking far term, do your research, understand what it is that gets you to your goal. Building hours as an instructor, we have found that a lot of people don't like, I shouldn't say a lot of people don't like, but some people are not flying as an instructor because they can fly, mail or, fly checks or cargo
right.
long distances now. I would say, look at that instructor job. It's a very tough thing, but I tell you, it'll put you on the top of your game, being an instructor. So look into doing things like that. That'll never get old. It really won't.
Yeah, you had mentioned too earlier in our conversation, and the term networking is used all the time and sometimes loosely, but you mentioned about for the areas that you're interested in, of staying in touch with people in those areas, as you said, because the relationships that you build, you never know when one day you may get a call from somebody or an email saying, hey, we just had such and such happen, and can you come in and talk about it? And maybe we have a position for you and that type of thing. I think that's one thing. One of the things I like to emphasize with the aspiring young aviation professionals is you can also work in other areas of the industry of aviation while you're working towards that ultimate goal, for example, of being a professional pilot. So, if you, coming back to what you said, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever the case may be, you can work somewhere else and still while you're building your hours as maybe a flight instructor, until you get to the point where you can then step forward with that. And that may send you in a whole nother direction. I've talked to people that started out wanting to be a professional pilot, ended up going to law school, and now they're an aviation lawyer, et cetera.
That's right. That's right. And, the question you asked, and you brought up a point. If you had told me at age 10, 15, 20 that I'd be doing now, you told me then I'd be doing this now, I laughed at you. But you never know what life has for you. Just keep doing what you're doing. The job I have now is because someone saw me, got to know me, and said, "Hey, I want to start a jet division. Are you interested?" And I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool. And so here I am.
So as we wrap up, I'm gonna put you on the spot and let you advise. I know that there's one young man watching this program. He is a 7th grader, I believe. He's about to turn 13 years old, I think within the next week or so. And he had been aspiring for like the past couple of years to be an aerospace engineer, but he's watched several of these shows and he's been looking at aviation with more depth and that type of thing. So now pilot is kind of on his radar. Being a pilot is on his radar. So putting you on the spot and knowing that he's watching right this very minute, what would you say to him as he's getting ready to finish up middle and go to high school in another year?
Let Vince put you in touch with me and let's talk.
You got out of that one. That was good, Deke.
Listen.
You're pretty smooth.
Listen, I offering to speak to someone, that was the most beneficial thing that helped me through many decisions in my career. Talk to someone who has been where you want to be. But I would say, so I can answer the question the way I think you want me to answer it.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
No, I would say stay with the science, technology, engineering, and math track. Practice, and I really mean this, practice being in and solving tough situations. And then lastly, I would say also practice team and group activities. Working with people is going to be one of the most challenging things that you've ever had to do. Academics is tough, certain aviation skills are tough, but people and learning about people, that's going to be one of the most challenging and the most rewarding things you're going to do.
Okay, so Joshua, you hear that? You've got homework to do, buddy. Deke, it's been a pleasure to have you. You're the first guest that I've had since I started doing the show of only having one guest. And I was like, gosh, I hope we can fill an hour. Now I feel like we could have filled 2. But I appreciate all that you've shared, especially very candidly about some of your experiences and the recommendations you've made, that type of, it's been really great to have you on the program.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And Vince, I do mean that. If you have people who want to talk, you know how to hook them up with me.
Yep. Well, I'm definitely going to put Joshua in touch with you. He's a really sharp kid. As a matter of fact, last year he was present for the 100th birthday of Brigadier General Charles McGee. And he actually read a little speech in reference to that in front of over 100 people. And at 12 years old, did it with, precision and it was very impressive. So,
all right, Josh.
So that's outstanding. He may be one of our guys on the Artemis program going to Mars. You never know.
All right. That's awesome.
All right. Deke, take care. It's great to have you on the show. Thank you, everybody, for watching All Things Aviation. My name is Vince Mickens. On behalf of the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation, we appreciate you being here with us every week, and we will catch up with you next week. Next week, we will have folks from various airports around the country talking about airport management and administration, so that should be a fun show to watch, too. Thanks again, and everyone have a good one.